This is Prabhupada's personal car for Bombay. These cars were personally purchased by myself in Calcutta, 1975. Prabhupada gave me the money to purchase 3 cars, one for each center, Vrindavan, Bombay, and Mayapur. And he wanted these cars made, and because the foreign cars were not able to ride nicely on Indian roads. So I went to Mr. Birla's factory outside of Calcutta and asked him for 3 cars, because at that time there was a waiting list of 7,000 people. In the early days you couldn't just go buy a car in India. You had to go on a waiting list because the government told the factories how many cars they could make. They could not make what they wanted to make. So I didn't want to wait for Prabhupada cars. He wanted them immediately. So I went to Mr. Birla and I asked him, can you give me 4 cars, because I ordered one for the Calcutta temple also. And he said, okay. And immediately that day, I was given the cars. Each car at that time cost 28,000 rupees only. It's 1975. However, when you buy these cars in those days, there was no quality control. So I wanted Prabhupada to feel most comfortable in his cars, and therefore I took the entire cars apart. We took out all the insides, everything, even the engine we took out, and we rebuilt the entire car, especially by insulation. Prabhupada didn't like noises, and he didn't like to bounce. Actually, they say these ambassadors will last forever if you just keep enough oil. Prabhupada told me that. When I first bought the cars, he said, keep enough oil and they will drive forever. And even in the material sense, Prabhupada's words about the ambassador car are true. Because now it is 2003, which is almost 40 years, and still this car is riding very nicely. So we should never underestimate the orders of the spiritual master, even on most trivial matters. We are here at the Rath Yatra ceremony for commemorating the 25th anniversary of the opening of the Juhu temple. And this is the original vehicle that Prabhupada had from 1975. We have preserved it. However, in its original state, this car had many lotus flowers on the car, as well as tilaks in chrome and lights underneath, as well as flags. We put ISKCON flags in the front of the car with a chrome tilak, showing that this was the most unique vehicle in 1975. Whenever this car rode down the road, everybody would look at it because it was completely different from any other car.
Although he was doing everything, he would give you the credit. Like when I got the Los Angeles temple, I remember in the opening lecture, Prabhupada said, all glories to Gargamuni, when he said this, Jai Om Vishnu Power Parama. He said, all glories to Gargamuni, all glories to, because I got the LA temple. But I knew that actually he got the temple, but he was giving me the credit, And that's one thing devotees sometimes forget. They think they're doing things, you see, but actually it's Prabhupada doing it through you, and then he gives you the credit. Just like in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna was on the battlefield and he was doing everything. But because Arjuna surrendered to Krishna, Krishna gave him the credit. So although I knew in my mind Prabhupada was giving the credit. That's why I get got very emotional when Prabhupada said, Jai, all glories to God, because I knew I didn't do this. Prabhupada did it. And then I get so upset because why does Prabhupada do this? He never takes the credit for anything. And yet he's doing it all. And that's why, to be with Prabhupada is the most wonderful experience because he'll never cheat you. Prabhupada never made you feel bad. He never did or said anything to make you feel bad. He always made you feel good. And even if he said something, like some of the servants who served Prabhupada, they say he was strict and he would say something. Later on, he would come back with something very kind and very nice, Because in all circumstances, the closer you got to Prabhupada, the more he would teach you about life and about serving Krishna and your responsibility to the Guru. You see, it's a never-ending process of surrender. And with some of us, including myself, it's very hard to surrender when you're conditioned to act on impulse, to act on the basis of your senses. So Prabhupada was able to supersede all of these things and just take all your good things in a charming way and engage them in Krishna's service, and then make you feel like a human being, like you're an important person in the service of Krishna. Because self-esteem is something that many devotees lack. And yet, Prabhupada had the most self-esteem. He was very proud to be a servant of Krishna, and you could see that. So, Prabhupada would make you feel important when you were a servant of Krishna, you see. Allen Ginsberg brought Tim Leary to meet Prabhupada. Tim Leary, is the he started the LSD movement. Actually, Prabhupada stayed with the chemist who invented and he was initiated. His name was Karlapati. And he was a graduate of Harvard. He was a black man, but very intelligent. And Prabhupada initiated him and stayed with him for a little while. And he was the chemist, along with Tim Leary, that invented the LSD. Carl, I forget his last name, but Carl Jurgens. And so, did you ever find him? No. And so Prabhupada was, when Prabhupada met these dignitaries who were in charge, he never criticized their ways. He never put them on the spot. He acted very charming, very nice. He never put anybody on the spot, because whoever came to him, he would ask them, help me in my movement, and be very charming with them. The same he did with George Harrison. He said, you're a very important person, and people are following you. You can help me in my mission. He would actually appeal to them and try to engage them in service to Krishna, you see. And he was very charming in the ways that he would do this with anyone, a professor, a scientist, a doctor, anybody. He was never condescending or critical of their personal life or anything. No, he would only see the good things and try to engage them in that service. To me, is unhuman. A person does not do that. Usually, we always look for the bad things in somebody. Prabhupada was just the opposite. In fact, if you did something wrong, he would reward you with more response. He never took things away from you. If you did something bad, he would send you out and do something more, give you more responsibility. The more bad you were or the more mistakes you made, the more responsibility he gave you, the more he was merciful with you. That you brought that up very nicely about the 26 qualifications, because I used to study those 26 qualifications. And I used to try to see if myself had them, and I didn't. And I said, wait a minute, these qualifications aren't meant for me. These are Prabhupada's qualifications. And that I could check every one, yes, yes, yes. And he had all of these questions. He had all of these qualifications. And therefore, there are many instances that I witnessed where Prabhupada had these qualifications, one of which is when, he told us to go to Pakistan. I was in Gainesville, I had opened the temple, and apparently somebody in Bombay from the Arya Samaj had questioned Prabhupada why he's preaching in India. Why don't you go to the Muslim countries? So he sent me and my brother to go to West and East Pakistan. Well, somehow we made it to West Pakistan, we made it to East Pakistan, but in those days we didn't read newspapers. So when we arrived, there was a war, a civil war going on that we didn't know about. I mean, when the day we arrived, there were vehicles overturned with fire and burning, and we had to walk 20 miles into the city. And we knew there was a Gaudiya Math there, so we thought we'd try and find it and take shelter till we knew what was going on here. And so we went there, and I spent over 2 months preaching, printing books there. But then the revolution got hot, and India entered, and I had to leave. And then I went to Pakistan. I didn't want to fail Prabhupada. I wanted to be successful in preaching. Then I went to West Pakistan, and it was in West Pakistan that Prabhupada got the newspaper report in Bombay that 4 Hare Krishnas were killed. So he knew I had an assistant, and he knew Brahmananda had an assistant. So I was the first to come back, and it was April 1971. It was the day of Ram Navami when I arrived from Karachi. And when Prabhupada saw me, he got up, he embraced me, and I felt all these things fly out of my body. It was the second time he embraced me, and I fell to the floor. And then he got down and pulled me up with my sika. It was like he was pulling me out of the material world. And then he slapped me on the back real hard. He said, very good, he was happy to see you. I mean, he was happy. Then he called the servants and said to cook us a feast. And everybody was fasting. And we had a whole feast with puris and sabji and people couldn't, they had a fast and I was eating. They all got envious. But Prabhupada he again took it as a sacrifice, that we were sacrificing our lives just on his order. He saw this, and he returned that love, by blessing you, by pulling on your sika, by slapping you on the back. You don't know what it is to have Prabhupada slap you on the back. It's not like any slap you've ever received. You feel some spiritualness out of that. You feel purifications. You feel your heart just drop into your stomach. It's the most wonderful feeling to have the spiritual master do something, to pull your sika. I can't describe it. Because, Prabhupada, although he may act like an ordinary man, was not an ordinary man. And anybody, who met him felt that way. Even great scholars gave him so much respect just by his demeanor. So to have him do personal little things like slap you on the back, you feel something. So He did the same with Brahmananda also.
Je anilo premadana karuna prachu